The question is obviously, well, how do we decide when a circumstance has this sort of moral significance? And the answer is simply that we must look to the intelligibility. We must look to what reason says about such acts. And reason, that is over the centuries, reason as it comes to us through the teachings of the church, but also in the laws of a society, basically in natural law, reason says that it is not a good thing to desecrate a holy place. So those are the three fonts, the three sources of morality. I'd like to finish just by talking about one of the two limiting factors that I mentioned earlier. I mentioned two of them, you'll recall. The first of them is simply ignorance. So in other words, if you're ignorant of something, well then you're not responsible for it. In fact, we've already been talking about ignorance. Okay, so if, for instance, a person doesn't realize that the building from which he takes the chalice is, or the cup, is a temple or is a church, well then he can't commit sacrilege. And so anyhow, ignorance is something which is always in the background as limiting what comes into the realm of the moral. But the other issue, the other limiting factor, is force. The standard line in Aristotle, or the classical definition of Aristotle, which comes in the third book of the Nicomachean Ethics, is that of which the initiative is outside the agent, that is the acting person. That is, the person involved contributes nothing to it. So that's the standard definition of force, exonerating force. An example, in fact, it's an example which is often used in the literature, and it's an example taken from ancient philosophy, in fact from Aristotle, is the example of a person being pushed onto a catapult, which triggers, and the catapult kills a friend of the person who's pushed onto the catapult. Well, in that case, the person, although in a sense he's the agent of that action, of the killing, it's not his moral action because he's been forced. Okay, so that's the standard example of force, or a standard example. It's my own opinion, but it's an opinion which is based on especially Aristotle and also Thomas, that we can extend that notion of force to take in some other issues. That is, to analyze how anything that does not depend on the agent's own initiative can be excluded from the moral realm. That is, he's not responsible for this.